Hello, my second and third graders. Today we are going to go outside and draw. The French used to call this in plein air, and they spelled it really funny. But look, in plein air makes sense, right? We're going to go outside and we're going to go in the plein air. Today what you're going to need is a piece of paper. You're going to need a pencil, at least one. You might even want to take two in case one breaks. An eraser is always a good idea. And when we come back in, we're going to be using markers and crayons possibly. So if you want to get some markers and an eraser, you're good to go. But since we're drawing outside, I don't want to take all of this with me. Really all I want to take are just the tools that I think I'm probably going to need the most. And the tools that I need the most are my pencil, eraser, and my paper. And probably something hard to draw on. This could be a clipboard. It could be a book that you put behind of your paper. But funny enough, I was down in my garage and I just found an old box. Well, the box can be kind of handy because I can also put the things in my box that I'm going to be using. And I think what I'm going to do is tape the paper to the top so that I can have both at the same time. And we're going to see how well this works. It may work, it may not. And we know that we can always change our plan if we need to. The reason I'm taping it is because I just don't want it to move around. Okay, tapey, tapey. Tapey, tapey. All right, here we go. Okay. And now that I'm ready, we are going to go outside. So here you go. You're going to travel with me. All right. So I've got my paper. Got my box. Going to put my stuff in my box. So here we go. You're walking. Whew, and it's nice and bright outside. So what I'm going to try to do is look around for an area that I think looks beautiful. So I've got a tree and a birdhouse. Okay, that could work. And I've got an azalea bush. That could work. And I think I like the azalea bush a lot. And I'm just going to sit down. So I'm going to sit on the ground. You might want to sit on a cooler or a chair or a bucket or whatever you want to. Now this is the tricky part for artists, right? Because we want to be able to do things outside, but there's a whole lot to look at. So sometimes what you might want to do is not draw everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw just my bush. I might draw one or two trees in the background and maybe one tree back here. That house back in my backyard, not gonna draw it. This big old hot mess over here, not gonna draw it. So here we go. You're gonna look here and then look down a little. Look here and then look down a little. And I hope I'm not making you too dizzy. So here we go. I'm gonna look and try to think about what is the basic shape of that bush. And when I'm looking at that, I see that pretty much, to me, it's kind of like, almost like part of an oval. So when I look back down here, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna draw an oval. I missed you here. That doesn't look like a bush. I know, it looks like a weird fish, doesn't it? But I'm not done yet, and that's okay. I'm gonna look back up. I've got some sticks that are the trees that are coming out from this edge of the bush over here. So I want to try to follow that up. Look back down. Draw, draw, draw. Draw, draw, draw. Look back up. I might skip a tree or two. And my tree doesn't have to be perfect. It does not. I might even kind of make this area up over here. We know I've got some trees back there. I don't have to look back up right now. And we know they've got some leaves around them because it's spring. So we have leaves now. Okay, so far I've got a pretty good sketch started. We know it's not a final copy. We're forgetting the house in the background. And I've got a whole lot of green over here. If I'm looking at my ground line is about right in the middle, maybe 1/3 of the way up on my azalea bush. So I need to add in the ground right there. One more tree. and it had a lot of green. Okay, so this is my start. I know it might look a little bit ridiculous, but the only thing I'm doing first is just laying in some basic shapes. Now I'm gonna go back in and look at a little bit more detail to that bush. So I see, of course, it's got some branches, it's got some leaves, and it's got some flowers. So I'm gonna come back in, and I drew really softly so I can erase pretty easily. No problem. And the way that I drew softly was I was holding really high up on my pencil. Remember, pretend like your pencil is a monkey. Well, your hand's the monkey. Your pencil's gonna climb the tree. So I'm gonna put in some branches. I don't care if they really connect. I'm drawing one big line. And then some little lines off of that. Doesn't have to be perfect. This border right here just gives me an idea of where I need to stop those leaves and those branches and those cute little flowers. So now that I've got some ideas about where things go, those are my little leaves that I'm just pretending to put in. I'm gonna erase. And erase, and erase, and erase. Okay. So, you know, artists get to add or take away as much as they would like to. I'm going to continue my ground line. And right now I've got a pretty workable sketch. If I wanted to stop here, I could. And I think that I will. We can add in a little bit more later if you want to. Or you could add in some more now. So look, where you go from here is really up to you. One way that you could move it is you could just continue to sit out here and draw with a pencil. It's a beautiful day. It's not too hot. That could be something that you might want to do. A second thing that you could do is you might want to add color. You could add color with colored pencils, you could add color with crayons, or you could add color with markers. But I'm going to show you a technique today that you might want to use. I've done this technique with my kindergartners and first graders just this year, and it was something I had totally forgotten about. So I'm going to take you back inside and show you the technique that I'm talking about. I'm not going to add any more detail to this because you're going to see we're going to be able to have some extra detail with the color technique that we're going to use. I'm going to stand up and hopefully not making you too dizzy. And here we go. We're going to walk back in. So we're going back in my garage today. And we have the little setup like before. There we go. Setting you down. And I will untape my paper. And put it down. So like I said, you can add in color with anything you want. But I'm going to show you something else that you can do if you've got some markers at home. Now, heads up, if you've got permanent markers will not work. If you've got regular Crayola markers, that's going to work just fine. If you have the Mr. Sketch markers or Rose Art or Prismacolors, any of those regular markers are going to work. But the Sharpies are the ones that do not work. So I'm going to add in some color everywhere, but not too much. So I'm going to draw on. This was that tree that had a whole lot of that bright green. I'm not worried about my pencil lines. I can erase them later, much later if I want to. And I'm changing up the lines just a little bit. And those trees in the backyard, they really overlapped, so I'm not going to worry too much if my lines are overlapping. And while I've got my marker that I want to use for my branches and my trunks, I'm just going to go ahead and do all of it all at once. when we're doing the landscape, we know that things that are lower down on the paper are supposed to look closer to us. So they're probably going to be big and they're going to be low down. The things that are up high are going to be farther away. And sometimes they'll be smaller. I have really big trees in my backyard. Okay. So I'm about finished with those. I know it still looks a little bit like an Easter egg around there if you can see that pencil line, but it's not going to for very long. I'm going to use a couple different colors of green for that bush. And no, I am not drawing leaves. I'm just making dots. You'll see why in a little bit. But the reason that I am doing different colors of green is because if you notice when we were outside, I had a lot of shade in my backyard. So where the sun was hitting, it was a bit of a brighter green. And where it was shady, it was a little bit of a darker green. If you were coloring with crayons, you would not use this technique. And yes, I'm scribbling. Do not freak out, because we know I'm not done yet. Sometimes art does look crazy. When we're not finished. Okay. I don't want to fully color in those trees. If you noticed back in the beginning of the video, the trees aren't full in. They're not filled in yet because it's still spring. And the leaves haven't gotten huge. I'm adding in a little bit of yellow where the sun was hitting the trees. I know it looks crazy. Don't worry. And no, I haven't forgotten about the flowers. And those flowers were kind of a dark pink. Oh my gosh. You're probably thinking at home, Miss Dupier, have you lost your mind? And maybe I have, and that's just okay. Okay. I'm going to scribble in a little bit of the grass color. A little bit darker underneath the azalea bush. And a little bit lighter as we come out. If you were really coloring with markers, no, you wouldn't be doing this. If you were really coloring with markers, you would fill in all of that area. But we're not finished with the color yet. You're gonna need to get a paintbrush. Any paintbrush is gonna be fine. And you need to get a cup of water. Just filled about halfway. You don't need to really fill it up too much. I don't have that immediately close to me. What I have is I have a paintbrush with water in it. So these are some of my favorite brushes, and you can get a pack of 3 of these on Amazon if you want to, but really, your plain paintbrush with the water is fine. I use these for when I'm traveling, and I think that they're really awesome. So the way that the water gets into it is you just twist it off like you would a regular water bottle, and you put in a little bit of water, and they're super handy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the marker color as if it's watercolor. You've already added the paint onto your paper. If I wanted to do sky, I should do sky now, because once you put the water on there and the paper is wet, you should not go back and add in any more marker. Well, what if I forgot the sky like you did, but I want to go back and add it in, but my paper is wet? Okay, easy peasy. All you have to do is wait for your paper to totally dry, go back in, add in the marker, do the water again. Okay, so let's just see how this works, and I think you're gonna like it. So I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna kind of almost re-scribble. You would dip your paintbrush into the water, wipe it off a bit, and then just paint over the whole paper. And you're gonna go in the same sections that you did when you were coloring or when you were drawing. And what I mean by that is you're not just gonna take paintbrush and go across, because all of that color will streak through. So you might notice how all of my colors now are really blending into one another, and that's exactly what I wanted. And the more you color with this, the more it's gonna blend, but be careful because your paper's wet. And if your paper is wet, you could make a hole through your paper. So when I get up here to my bush, I am gonna go branch by branch because I don't want it to blend. I don't want all of those branches to be really crazy and messy. And it doesn't take very long. I'm anxious to see how this bush is gonna look once I've put in all of the leaves and things. So I'm gonna start going and see what it looks like. I think it's looking pretty cool. My only thing is I wish I would have added in a bit more green, but like I said, once my paper is dry, all I have to do is I can go back and add more color then. You just don't want to add marker when your paper is still wet. I don't know, maybe I'll like it when it dries. And let's do one more tree and see how it goes. Okay. These are just regular water-based markers that I'm using. Now that I've got brown on my brush, I'm just going to do the rest of the trees. And of course, anytime that you want to stop the video and work on something yourself, you should do that. You can always come back and look at the video again later if you want to. Or you can work on something yourself. You can pause the video. You do whatever's going to work for you. If I wanted to go back and erase those pencil lines later on, I could. But pencil lines are actually allowed in watercolor pictures. It's not such a big deal. I think this is looking pretty cute. So I hope that you enjoyed looking at this technique today. It's a way that we don't always use markers, but it's kind of a fun way for something a little bit different. I'm kind of liking that bush a little bit. So anytime that you are out, going out is a good idea, as long as you're not going very far right now, and you're on a walk, try to notice things around you that you might want to draw later on. All right? Have a great day. Talk to you soon.